Hi there. Today we're going to talk about devices management for Plexus Lab. So about our setup, here we have a PC with Ubuntu installed. Please look at the installation video to see how to install the Plexus Lab into an Ubuntu PC. That PC has two Ethernet ports. The first one, it's set up to communicate with our I/O devices. In our case, a Plexus Pod C1. And a second Ethernet port that it's connected to a router to be able to connect to the internet. This Plexus Pod is then connected to some sensors and some relays and some buttons and so on. Alright, so let's see how to add a device first. So let's open Chrome. We go to localhost /Plexus. We log in. So once you log in, the first you see on the left there is a bunch of menu items. The first one is devices. So if we click on devices, as you can see at the beginning we have nothing. We can add up to 20 devices. So let's add the first one, so our Plexus C1 connected. So we're going to give it Plexus Pod C1. And here we put the IP address of the device that we want to add. So in our case, 192.168.1.3. Now here's where we select the device type. For the purpose of this tutorial, we're only going to select Pod C1, which is what available for purchase on our website. There are other possible devices which are explained into the documentation. So let's select Plexus C1. And save it. Right, so now it's added automatically. As you can see, there's a list of all the possible input outputs already present on the device. So on the left here, you'll see the list of all the devices, which if you add more than one, let's do a test. Test 2, let's give a random IP address. Okay, once you have more than one, you can actually edit the orders, just in case you want them in a specific order here. On the left panel. All right, now let's look at the interface. On the top, we have the name of the device, and we have the direct link. So over here, it will be the IP address of the device. In this case, if we click on it, we'll get into the page of the device itself, where we can change the IP address or activate the watchdog. Now going back to Plexus Lab, we have an info page, which pretty much you can change the name if you wish to change the name. Let's call it Plexus Pod _C1. And you can also edit the IP address. Save it, and you see the actual name changed. Now, this section over here is where we have the list of all the channels and all the possible input outputs. It says which type of device we're doing and we're using, and here it will say if it's active, not active, or if there's some error. So in this case, it's not active yet because we need to activate it from here. So once we click this activation button, we'll see this, when it's green, that means it's communicating well with the device. It's getting all the data. And here we get the response time. So in this case, something between 0.8 and 1.2 milliseconds. All right, now let's get into the various channels. So each channel have the channel number over here, or the channel ID, let's call it, a name for the variable or for the whatever device we have or sensors or actuator connected to it. Here the value. So for digital output, so in this case the type will be digital output number 1. We have this switch because we can turn on or off that digital output. Here are the limits. So whatever the minimum value is and maximum value is, in case of digital output, it's always 0 and 1. And then an info page. So for each single channel, there's going to be an info page. So in the case of a digital output, we only can change the name. So in our case, we have connected to this first channel a thermocouple. So we want to power the thermocouple. It's a 420 milliamp thermocouple, so we need to power it. So with Plexus Lab, we can say thermocouple underscore power, and then we can select power supply. So once we select power supply and we save it, this channel automatically turns on and it keeps everything on all the time. So we don't need to write a function to be able to put this to 1 because this is already done automatically by the software. If we remove the power supply, we can then turn it off or turn it on as we wish. Now channel number 2 will be a digital input. So in a digital input, the limits are still going to be between 0 and 1. Now we got nothing connected to here, but as just to show you in info, the only thing we can change in a digital input will be just the name. Now the third type of variable, it will be an analog input. So analog input, in this case, we have a thermocouple connected, and so we have a value coming in. Now it's set as voltage input between 0 and 100. In the info here, we got much more settings that can be done. So we can change the name and call it T for thermocouple. We can set the minimum and maximum value range between the 4 and 20 milliamp or between the 0 and 10 volts. And we can assign a decimal point value or even an offset. And then for the case of Plexus C1, we can select between a 0-10 volts input or 0-20 milliamp or 420 milliamp input. So in our case, it's a 420. Our thermocouple can read between 0 and 100 Celsius, so we save it this way. Now the value is already scaled at room temperature because the thermocouple is over here. And so this is the value of the thermocouple, and you already can see it. Now, the only other different type of channel here, it will be an analog output. So as same thing as the analog input, you can set the minimum, maximum value, decimal point, and offset value. Now, we only have 0-10 volts available for Plexus Pod C1, so we cannot select between the two. Okay, now on the left of the screen, you're going to see that we put together a little test board to show you the connection between Plexus Lab and an actual Plexus Pod. So here on the top left, we have this Plexus Pod C1 connected to the Ethernet that goes straight to the computer. We have a little set of relays that turn on this LED strip. We have a little voltage generator that it's going to send an analog input to the Plexus Pod, a series of lights, a couple of buttons, and a selector. So let's start getting into it, set up a couple of these elements, and we see what the interaction is. So on digital output number 3 over here, we're connected with the first little light here on the left. So what we all need to do is go here and let's say call it light 1. Now spaces are forbidden, so make sure that if you want to put some space, you just put an underscore. So we save it. Now if we turn this channel on directly from here, we see that this lights turn on. Turn it off, and so on. So you have direct control of a digital output in this case, directly from the interface without really setting up much. Same value, for example, for light 2. Save it. And you can see if we turn it on, light number 2 turn on. Now, one thing you noticed is that every channel that I change the name to, they're going to become in a bold type font. So this means that this one has been changed and it actually been assigned. So since we have a long list of channels, and we probably just, let's say we only have a few things attached to a Plexus Pod, we only want to see the one that really matters. there's a little eye here on top. If we click on it, it's only going to show us what is actually being edited, so we can focus on our things that we want to control. Now the thermocouple is over here. You can see it's 23 degrees. If I hold it in my hand, we're going to see the temperature rising just slightly, a little bit. So you have a direct feedback of your sensors and your actuators. You can just directly connect them here. Now I'm going to change all these names and show you that everything is going to work. Okay, now we're done setting up all the names. So by clicking the eye here, then we can see that this is all that we can control. So to test them out, we have the temperature power up here. We're actually going to set it as power supply because we always want it to be on, so that's great. So even when the system restarts, all these ones will be just set to on automatically. We have a proximity sensor down here that you can see if I put my finger in front of it, it will give me 1. Same if I let it go, it will give me 0. Light number 1, light number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we have a voltage generator up here. You see 6.6. Now we see 6.6 over here. We have set it as minimum 0, maximum 10, which is the maximum output in volts, with 1 decimal value and a 0 10 volts. So we see exactly the value that it's generated. We have 3 relays that control the red LED, the blue LED, and the green LED. Then it's digital inputs. We have a bunch of, so we have button number 1, which is this one over here. If you see, if I press it, this one becomes 1. Pressing the button number 2, if I press it, becomes 1. And then we have a selector. So this one will tell us that it's in the 1 position, this one in the 2 position, and so on. All right, so this is what we need to do to set up a device. There's not much more to say here. It's a pretty simple interface. If you have any questions, always just let us know in the comments. For different type of devices, there might be slightly different settings, but in general, it's the IP address and it's setting up the names for whatever you have connected to that specific device. All right, now that we talked about actual devices connected outside, one thing you can do with Plexus Lab, it's interconnect 2 Plexus Labs together. So in our network, we have a second device under the IP address 10.0.0.202. So if we go to the Plexus page and we log in, see here it's already set up with other devices connected to it. One thing that we can do is to get some variables directly from one Plexus lab to another so that we can interconnect machines that they are controlling different processes. So if I want to connect these 2 Plexus lab, one thing I need to do is to go to System and make sure that the API in bridge mode is activated. Same thing needs to be on the second device. So if we go into System and make sure that this is activated. Now, let's go into the second device where we want to get data from and make sure that we copy the API password. Now you can change this password if you want to, or it's generated automatically randomly when Plexus Lab is installed. So we copy this password in the second Plexus Lab. Go back to the first one, go to devices, add a new device, let's call it bridge 1. We put the IP address of the other Plexus lab, so temp 0.0.202. Select Plexus bridge and enter the password. Save it. So now in this Plexus bridge, as you can see, there's no channel. So we need to manually add the variables that we want to retrieve from the other Plexus lab. So for example, if we go to the other page, in the sections list where we have all our virtual variable, which we'll explain in another video, we can get this variable, let's call it ABC, so this value 50. So if we go back to this one, we add a variable, we just put the name, ABC, save it. We see now the value is 0. If we activate it, now they're communicating via Wi-Fi, so this might be a little bit slow, but we see that the value is already 50. So if we go into the other Plexus lab and we change the value to 55, for example, we go back to the first one, we have 55. So they're now interconnected, and we can call virtual variable from the second Plexus lab into the first one in order to connect multiple machines of a system. You can have many computers in your lab or in your experiment setup or in your industrial process, and all these machines can communicate to each other very simply just by exchanging variables. Alright, hope this was helpful. Please let us know in the comment if you have any questions, or send us any email to automation@bioforcetech.com. Thanks.